Italy. Sicily is home to the most infamous mafia organizations. One of these organizations' commanders, Lorenzo, arrives at a remote winery by car and discovers complete destruction. When he eventually makes it to the basement, where his guys are putting Robert under arrest with guns drawn, he buckles up and enters to see still more victims strewn about. Robert maintains his composure in the face of this circumstance, assuring Lorenzo that he has come to retrieve property that is not his. He observes that this is where Robert meets his demise, impressed that Robert managed to find him. However, Robert reverses the situation by declaring that Lorenzo has 9 seconds to choose his destiny. 9 seconds have elapsed and there is still no winner when Robert takes the nearest goon's weapon and destroys the remainder. He then quickly puts an end to Lorenzo and grabs what he really came for, a number of keys. He orders Lorenzo's child to remain outside, but Robert is shot soon after. He continues to doesn't have the courage to murder the small man. Robert then considers taking away himself, but his work is far from over. Eventually, Robert faints while returning and the local police officer discovers that he is in critical condition. He is taken to the closest physician in Altamonte and is recovered. Robert is fortunate because it was merely a .22 pistol. The physician, Enzo, questions if the individual the cop saved was a good man or a terrible man. Robert is unsure. He attempts to stand up. However, he has to rest so that his wound can recuperate. Robert receives the necessary relaxation for the following several days and regains the ability to walk. Though it's healing wonderfully, he still needs some time. He strolls outside but feels uncomfortable in this tiny town. Concerned with the cameras and the police, he can't seem to unwind. After settling into a cafe, Gio, the cop who had come to his aid, presents him to his daughter. He acknowledges that Dr. Enzo is a well-known individual in their entire city. Gio then returns Robert's car keys, pointing out that he doesn't stick his nose where it shouldn't. Robert later gets in touch with the financial operations group of the CIA, which keeps an eye on suspicious money is exchanged. According to him, Lorenzo's vineyard and 55 containers of wine were imported by Sicily from Syria. Wondering why wine would need to be imported for a vineyard, he ends the call before they can try to find out where he is. In the days that follow, Robert grows increasingly acquainted with the locals and notices a motorcycle gang extorting money from multiple, but he decides not to become involved, protecting companies under the pretense of protection money. When he passes the biker gang the following day, he sees the proprietor of a fish stall struggling to make a routine payment and discovers the owner is being attacked by Marco, the leader of the gang. As the gang drives away, Robert notices them and gives them a nasty gaze in return. Marco travels to Naples, Italy, to see his brother Vincent. In the interim, Vincent, who is the Camorra Mafia's head, is coercively making victims sign disclaimers for removal. Death threats are made upon those who reject. Vincent's right hand is Marco. That evening, when Robert and Enzo are chatting and spending time together, Robert shares his want to prepare fish for Enzo. When he returns the following day to the fish stand, the proprietor declines to letting him pay for the fish on the grounds that he is one of Enzo's friends. Even when Robert insisted, payment is not accepted by the owner. In the meanwhile, following Robert's lead, a group of CIA operatives, including Emma, who had answered his call, finds drugs that are secreted within the millions of dollars in cash in bottles kept in the cellar of the vineyard. What most clearly it's concerning that this operation had never previously crossed their minds. Inspired by this finding, they carry on with their research. Vincent gives his sibling the order to apply more pressure to Altamonte. Vincent has grand plans for resorts, casinos, and hotels. The overarching plan include driving out the locals in order to seize control of the whole coast of Sicily. Robert has grown fond of the town and is ready to go once he finally recovers. Residents start to hear an urgent alarm. There's a fire. The fish market, the owner's means of subsistence, is destroyed by fire. The proprietor, dejected, observes as all of his lives. His eyes burn with work. Robert looks back and notices the group of bikers laughing. After watching the video, Gio asks for further details on the vehicle that started the arson. After helping to remove the rubble, Robert retreats to his favorite cafe for a cup of tea after working at the fish market. There, he develops a closer relationship with Amina, the proprietor of the cafe, who, once it closes for the day, exposes him to the genuine aspects of Italian culture and food. Even though the town is little despite its small size, its citizens are incredibly kind, helpful, and watchful of one another. Regards to the group's combined efforts, the fish stand is almost back to how it was. The locals have accepted Robert into their close-knit society and grown to see him as one of their own. Robert is enjoying his tea at Amina's cafe when he sees Emma, who has put him down. She asks how he's doing, became to have such precise knowledge about the illegal actions of the winery. Robert doesn't clarify anything in his answers, but there's a part of him that wants to tell her the whole tale, but he feels unable to. Thus, Emma continues her investigation, dropping hints about the mystery behind her finding him. As a result, Robert tells her everything that's going on and shows her that he's not to be taken lightly. Robert is pleasantly delighted when Emma screams out his name as she turns to go. Meanwhile, Gio receives an unexpected call telling him that his daughter has left school early, which worries him. The instructor claims she was picked up by a police. He heads straight home, only to discover that he was in a terrible condition. Along with his thugs, Marco has seized Joe's spouse and daughter taken prisoner. This is in reprisal for Joe's attempts to learn more about the arson. Gio is then attacked by Marco, making his family witness the brutal altercation. Following the attack, Gio receives a terrifying threat from Marco, alerting him to the serious repercussions of his family should he once more intervene in their matters. Following the beating, he gets better at Enzo's house and Robert sees the terrible scene. The Camorra Mafia, according to Enzo, is similar to cancer and there's no way to get better. They must put up with it. Robert gets unexpectedly confronted while out for a jog at the church by Emma. There have been no concrete findings from their inquiry of Robert. He's a phantom in their framework. As a result, Robert is no longer regarded as a suspect, following Lorenzo's passing. In the short term, anyway, for 10 years, Lorenzo was listed as the most wanted person by Interpol, was renowned for running an extensive internet empire. Seeing Emma's lack of experience, Robert chooses to give her further advice in an effort to help. He asks a provocative question: why would Lorenzo take a chance on drug smuggling via the safest port in the area? Emma knows that she doesn't understand why Robert particularly chose to approach her with this knowledge. Though, Robert is having a great time when Marco and his goons show up in an attempt to put pressure on Gio. They manage to convince the Somalians to lend them their boats. Gio says nothing at all, clearly terrified for his family's security. In the middle of this heated environment, Robert fixes a menacing gaze on Marco, who at last confronts him. Marco says Robert has interfered with other people's. Robert responds that Marco's actions make it difficult to stay out of matters. Robert declares that he thinks timing matters in life, pointing out that Marco's it's an especially bad time. He gives Marco a warning and suggests that he leave the town by yourself or suffer the consequences. Robert's stare seems humorous to Marco at first, but his amusement diminishes and becomes more painful as Robert twists his arm. Marco gives his soldiers the order to depart and places he can also leave after placing his pistol on the table. Marco orders the van to be ready, saying he will carry out this American interloper. One of Marco's men accidentally runs over while Marco is reaching for a gun from him, as well as the car's driver has been discovered deceased, with just a bottle as his only weapon. Robert stops a third goon, leaving Marco alone and with only a knife in his possession. Marco is overcome by Robert, who breaks his arm. Then he coerces Marco into a scenario where unintentionally brings about his own death while under Robert's keen scrutiny. When cops discover cocaine in the van in the morning, Gio knows who is behind the ruse. There has been a terrible bombing in Rome. Emma gets a call from her significant other, demonstrating that the attack involves Syrian nationals. This disclosure connects to the drug money, indicating that it is being utilized to finance these endeavors. Emma remembers Robert's advice, persuaded that the secret to Naples is where the puzzle pieces together, and intends to speak with nearby vendors. Emma pays a visit to the head of police at Naples and provides him with the individual she wishes to examine. He omits one name, letting her know that he can't let her do it. However, that is completely at odds with what she does. She provides the prisoner with a chance to obtain information. He reveals the information to one of their bases. When the Italian SWAT team seizes command, the police chief tells Vincent that the CIA was involved as he is mourning the loss of his brother and suggests that he cease his activities, cautioning that Emma might find out that Camorra is involved in purchasing drugs from the bombers in order to run a successful company. Vincent promises, unconcerned, to handle Emma by alone and insist that the chief track for his brother's murderer, following the chief's insults. In response, Vincent cuts off the chief's right hand to demonstrate the repercussions of disobedience. Robert contacts Emma on her way to see Chief, telling her that she shouldn't be meeting the bombers, not seek, but the Camorra. Her car explodes as she hangs up, and she barely makes it out alive. She is brought to the hospital right away, where she tells her partner about Camorra. Vincent, meantime, traveled to Altamonte, hurling Gio to the ground, in an attempt to discover who killed his brother. He calls the other residents together. He makes death threats if he doesn't. Joe's family will be in front of him admit it. After observing enough agony, Robert drops his weapons, acknowledges his guilt, and gives up control of his destiny. However, Enzo enters as the sirens sound. The others begin filming in an effort to defend Robert. Robert murmurs that Vincent will return, but for the time being he backs off. It's going to happen sooner rather than later. Later on, the Mafia has no idea what to do with anything about Robert, but Vincent is adamant that he will murder him and set Altamore on fire down to the floor. Tomorrow, they'll depart. Robert begins softly as Vincent is sleeping, taking care of his guards outdoors. Individuals within receive a single tapping on the head using a silencer. Who's in charge of the cameras? Deceased. Robert silently cleaned up about 15 guys. After seeing a drip of blood, Vincent awakens to find a body breaking through the glass. Vincent gestures tell his guys to be on the lookout, but they've all already left. His attempt is to see if he is so desperate that he is willing to give his life to guys who are practically not breathing. Vincent becomes agitated and begins to shoot his submachine pistol, but Robert simply knocks him unconscious and gives him medicine. Vincent promises his guys will find him when he wakes up. Vincent attempts to break free, but Robert merely menacingly stares at him while he unties him, as he dashes outside and through the gate, and Vincent follows him silently up until Vincent's mission comes to an end as his heart gives out. As Emma observes the Camorra family's decline, Robert pays her a visit after the bombing has stopped. He clarifies that there are $366,400 in this suitcase money. To get it, He was at that vineyard. 9 months ago, Greg's pension was compromised fund with a single keystroke. For that, he pursued a whole mob. The keys Lorenzo possessed were the room containing bearer bonds, account numbers, and millions of dollars. And all he stole was $300,000 for some guy's pension. He has no idea. Robert hands Emma the bag and says she'll understand. It's a wonder that when Emma finds Greg and gives him the money, both he and his wife cry. Emma gets a call in her office. Robert's black book of government contacts stating, "Your mother would be proud of you." Emma is Robert's former CIA co-worker's daughter. At a neighborhood celebration in Altamonte, Robert is having a good time at a cafe. He's at peace, content, and doesn't need to resort to violence anymore.